Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This one is going to be the Avatar 2026 preview video. So this is going to be the first of my usual 3 end of year videos. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you might be asking the question, why are you doing this one first? Isn't this usually the last of those 3 that you do? Well, because Awakening of Roku is not out yet, it means that, I have to kind of push forward the one that doesn't kind of depend on opinions on the content for the year up first. So that's why we're doing the preview video first. And then I will try to get the 2025 year in review video out at some point just before the end of the year, hopefully. And then it probably does mean that, the top 5 story moments from the year is probably going to have to wait until early next year. That's just what happens when they release a book on the 30th of December. But we are here for the 2026 preview. So right before we jump in, I do just want to mention that I do have YouTube channel membership enabled on the channel if you would like to help support the channel and help me out. There are 2 tiers available. At the higher tier, the main bonus that's different from the lower tier is that you do gain access to occasional exclusive videos that I put up on the channel. A lot of the times these are video game videos of me playing games like Fortnite, Pokemon, different things like that. There's also other stuff that happens, like I have a bunch of Lego build videos, certain other TCG opening videos, just stuff that is maybe a little bit more random if I was to post it kind of normally on the channel. So it's just extra content there if you are interested in supporting. But otherwise let's jump into the 2026 Avatar preview video. So we'll start with Netflix Avatar because it's going to be the big project for the year that actually is released first. So we of course have already started the marketing for season 2. Very recently we did get the teaser trailer for season 2, so we have about a minute of footage, plus we know actors and stuff like that. But mostly what the teaser focused on was effectively showing us Toph for the first time, as well as actually highlighting the Serpent's Pass quite a lot, as I guess one of the early Netflix season 2 episodes. That seems to be the takeaway there. Even though it's episode 12 of the original, it's likely going to be positioned much earlier in season 2, but we'll get into that. Season 2 is going to release in 2026. We don't have a date yet. They didn't reveal that as part of the teaser. I suspect we'll know the date by probably January, February, when they do more of a actual build into the actual release. But the timing of when they do choose to release it is going to be interesting because they have a few things they need to sort of avoid either side of the kind of release window. At the very start of the year, they have to avoid, I suppose, Avatar 3 and just that kind of franchise potential confusion over Avatar. So James Cameron's Avatar is probably going to be very much a kind of end of December, early January type thing. But then One Piece Season 2 on Netflix is happening in March, I believe. So they're not going to want to go too close to that. And likely Season 2 of One Piece will be before Season 2 of Avatar, just because that's the order it's kind of gone in ultimately. Then, so they just have to go after March, basically, a couple of weeks after One Piece Season 2. But then they can't go too far afterwards because they don't want to risk, I think, confusing any of the marketing stuff for the Aang movie in October. So it seems like Netflix and Avatar Studios are going to work together to make sure that they don't kind of clash and probably more help each other out here. So what I think that leaves us with is April, May probably being the ideal release kind of window here. This way there's some space for One Piece to get its sort of couple of weeks, month in the spotlight. Then Netflix Avatar can go, and then it gives you a few weeks to potentially build up to maybe July or June trailer for the Aang movie. I think that's a way to position it so that it'll get Avatar back in the kind of public consciousness. People will be talking about it again, and then you can roll directly into the marketing campaign for the Aang movie. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But The big thing with season 2 is that it's going to have to show us how they have responded to feedback from season 1, because this is going to be their only chance to actually respond to feedback. Because they've filmed season 2 and 3 back to back, there's no room to adjust basically from here. They can maybe fix some stuff in editing potentially for season 3, but the core vision of what they are doing for season 2 and 3 has already been in place. So the big adjustment is going to happen. We're going to have to see how things have changed here, and that'll be really, really telling here in terms of, is it going to be more of the same, or will the show go from getting a generally decent reception to being able to be regarded as actually like a good adaptation? That's going to be the big takeaway here. So obviously some of the main points that they probably want to really adjust here is they need to do a better job at characterizing Team Avatar. It was really noticeable with season 1 how much better the Zuko arc was done than most of the Team Avatar members, especially Katara didn't get too much spotlight, so Katara needs some time to shine, especially in season 2. But there's a lot of other things they also need to adjust. Yes, for season 2, the story material is stronger, but that also means higher expectations. That, oh, cool, the Ba Sing Se arc is great, but if they don't do the Ba Sing Se arc well, then they're going to get even more negativity. It doesn't just guarantee that things are just better because of that. You know, in the same way that I think a lot of people are like, oh, but it looks like this actor's there to represent this episode. It doesn't mean they're going to do that episode like in full or in detail. It just means that I guess it's going to be referenced, but we don't know if it will be done well. My concerns mostly revolve around a lot of what I have to say about season 1, which is that I think 8 episodes is not enough to adapt 20 animated episodes. This is going to lead to a lot of important material cut or rushed. And especially because even though the material is better for season 2, you still have a lot of episodes that are done in the format of season 1. 201 to 209 are all basically individual episodes that, yeah, a lot of cutting around is going to happen here, because you have to devote a big chunk of episodes to the Ba Sing Se arc to do it well as a combined arc. But these episodes where it is more one-off, you're going to have to make some choices here overall, and that's going to be really interesting. How do they handle the book before the plot-focused stuff properly comes into play? But also, from the teaser trailer, we know that even, say, like 210 to 213, like right before the journey to Ba Sing Se, right before we get into the Ba Sing Se arc, that's also looking a little bit like, oh, they might be doing some interesting stuff there. The recent teaser trailer already highlights that they are doing things differently, with Appa still with the group for the Serpent's Pass, and also Toph not with the group for the Serpent's Pass. So what exactly does that mean? It obviously suggests that Serpent's Pass is going to be one of the first episodes. Remember, there is going to be a relatively big time skip that's built into the show. So there's going to be some interesting stuff at the very start where they probably establish that quite a few things have happened off screen. And maybe we do jump in and the Serpent's Pass, the journey to Ba Sing Se is already on the go kind of type thing. And then one thing that I think a lot of people have been suggesting that very well could be the case is that they kind of do solve a lot of their problems if they can make a lot of the stuff that happens elsewhere happen in Ba Sing Se. So if Toph is now from Ba Sing Se, that kind of helps to maybe fix some things, but will they make a change that relatively big? We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, from book 1, remember to expect cuts, additions, and the repositioning of scenes and episodes. Remember how they did Omashu in season 1. It's a mix of course, 105, but Jet is in there, so 110, and Northern Air Temple is there as well, with like Teo and the Mechanist and stuff like that. So they really mashed a bunch of stuff together in that way. I do think season 2 is going to be an improvement, but likely not significant enough to kind of really change maybe the perception of the show. It might get a better overall kind of average review score rating, but is it going to take it into the like, this is actually really good territory? I'm not sure, but there is the potential, I do think. So for me overall with this, it is cool to have another big Avatar project in the year. But I do very much consider the live action show to mostly just be that kind of nice, big bonus project that will be useful to help build hype for Avatar Studios. That this year it's actually going to be positioned relatively nicely to, I think, help to build fandom and interest in Avatar prior to Avatar Studios. And then if it does turn out to be good, all the better. It's just a bonus extra thing for the year. I thought season 1 was okay, so I think I'm in a decent spot to, I think, kind of receive season 2 well, especially if they do make some improvements. I'm interested to see what they do with it. I'm going to do coverage on this when it does come out, and we'll just see how it goes. That's the main thing to say with Netflix Avatar. So next, of course, we have to get into Avatar Studios and the animated projects, which are actually going to start coming out in 2026. I think we just have to assume there won't be any more delays, and that after all the waiting, the Aang movie is actually going to come out in October. Maybe they'll adjust the date by like a week or two, but to me, if they have to delay it out of October, especially if they have to delay it out of 2026, it just makes them look so bad after all this time if they still can't get it out. And the other reason they have to kind of get it going this year is just because the amount of other stuff just with the launch of Avatar Studios that like is depending on the movie actually coming out. Publishers with books kind of ready to go, merchandise makers with products, I guess, ready to go for January. Oh no, wait, October. You got to hit a date eventually, because there's a lot relying on this ultimately. And yeah, we've been saying this is the year it finally happens for far too many years. When you really break it down, I suppose 2025 is the first year where they full on missed when they said it would start. Everything before that was always, I think, just going to be a case of it's too early. But now we're in the year where, yeah, the movie's meant to be out, which is different than how we felt about 2025, because the movie was always scheduled for like January 2026. But this year we expect marketing campaign plus actual release. And then we're getting close enough to Seven Havens, roughly scheduled for 2027, that like, yeah, we're expecting a decent amount of information on that as well in the year, just with the Comic-Cons and stuff like that. So let's get to talk about the Aang movie specifically. Paramount, of course, have been extremely cautious with information surrounding this movie. They had opportunities at both conventions in 2025 to show something about this movie and specifically chose not to. We know from what Brian said that they wanted to show something, but they were not allowed to. So Paramount made a decision at the top level, no, don't show anything. And that's why we're still in this situation where we know basically nothing about this movie, even though it's the movie that's out in like 10 months. Crazy situation. So yeah, 2026 has to take us from the absolute basics of information that we have right now through a full marketing cycle all the way up to release. We have to do everything this year because we are nowhere. Even the logo we have is not actually the finalized logo, and they still need to like officially reveal the new logo. You know, there's all that sort of stuff. So yeah, after all the waiting, their marketing needs to deliver. The future success of the franchise kind of depends on it working out for them. And this is why we're going to be keeping an eagle eye on what they are and are not doing when it comes to marketing, because you've missed so many opportunities to talk about stuff earlier. And if the way you're actually going to talk about it is like weak, it's going to be very noticeable. So they need to get it right. So yeah, October 9th, 2026 is the release date for the movie. When, in relation to this date, are they actually going to start the marketing? Because it's going to have to happen before October, obviously. Broadly speaking, with Paramount in charge of the marketing, they're obviously treating this very different than everything else Avatar Studios. They tend to wait until about 4 months before release to start their marketing push for their movies. In or around 4 months is typically when they reveal that kind of trailer one. That would put us at about June in relation to October. So, but the Aang movie is in a position where it does feel like we need some information before that point, because like we're nowhere right now. Like we don't have an official image, movie poster or anything. It does feel like prior to the timing of trailer one, we need to get at least one piece of information before that. So when is that going to hit? Because I don't think we're going to go straight from now, knowing nothing, straight to a trailer with nothing in between. So San Diego Comic-Con 2026, which is July 23rd to the 26th, is going to be, I think, the big event for Avatar this year. This is going to be the first time they properly really get to do, kind of have to do, an Avatar Studios panel. They can't not have this be a big deal. They could choose to do the trailer here, but my thoughts on this are that SDCC feels like pretty late in the game to do one of the first major parts of marketing for this movie, that being the trailer. I think we'll have the trailer before San Diego Comic-Con, so that the show floor, the Avatar presence at San Diego Comic-Con can be movie focused. We're not waiting for the reveal at the convention. We've already had a partial reveal, and then at Comic-Con can be the everyone now knows about the movie, and we can talk even more about it and build the hype. I think that's what they need to do to maximize San Diego Comic-Con, is they need to have enough out there already that the show floor can have big posters and standees up of the characters, new designs, that sort of thing, showing off what the concept for the movie is with the older team Avatar. The issue beyond San Diego Comic-Con is that a lot of the early year events are like industry and behind closed doors events where we might expect news to kind of like little bits of news to follow some of these events, but like the events themselves are not going to be revealing giant chunks of information. So where is that first reveal of like an image going to come out? We really don't know. And this is why there's such a mystery surrounding the Paramount marketing. We don't know what they're going to do. So yeah, they either have to wait until SDCC to do all this stuff, or more than likely, I'm guessing we'll have the trailer in the weeks just before SDCC. That's my thoughts. The other events that I was alluding to there, we have CinemaCon 2026, which is April 13th to the 16th. Annecy Film Festival is June 21st to the 27th. SDCC, of course, is July 23rd to the 26th. New York Comic Con, interestingly, is October 8th to the 11th, with the movie release date of October 9th being right in the middle of New York Comic Con. Day 2 of NYCC is the release date for the movie, so New York Comic Con could also be kind of big for the movie. But at the same time, it's like, a movie releasing during the convention probably means they maybe can't talk as much about it as you'd expect, because it's just go see it. You can let the show floor do a lot of the marketing, like whatever panel they do at New York Comic Con, I'm guessing would have to be about other things realistically. But we'll see what way they go about doing it. That's the big thing. So you can maybe see the idea of like how this could work, of like April seems about the right time to maybe do the first visual reveal, like a movie poster or something like that, in or around CinemaCon. Again, CinemaCon will be they show stuff behind closed doors to industry people. They'll probably show a clip of the movie to people. We won't get to see that clip. We'll get descriptions of it, but we won't get to see it. But they could coincide that with, and hey, you're thinking about the movie, here's a visual teaser. You're not getting to see what everyone else saw, but here's something. That could be nice. The timing of Annecy Film Festival might be a decent timing for the trailer. Again, will it be to coincide with Annecy? I don't know, but in or around June or like end of May might be the right time for the first trailer. That allows then SDCC to be the big news blowout for Avatar Studios across the board, including more clips, images, trailer 2. Probably the big thing actually they'll do at SDCC is that this will be the first time they really show off the cast like in person to everyone. You now know what the movie is from the trailer that you've seen. Now, here is everyone talking about it, and we're going to have some sort of a reveal at the panel. Plus, we can also talk about Seven Havens. Like that's kind of what we have to do at that point. And then, yeah, how big will they go at New York Comic Con? Like, what will they do to acknowledge the fact that the movie's just out? Will they do some sort of crazy screening where, like, you can get a ticket to watch the movie with the cast and crew? That would be kind of crazy. I think everyone would want to attend that, but who knows if that's what they'll do. And then we're talking a lot about marketing here. How should they actually approach doing that? What do Paramount actually need to do to successfully sell this movie to as many people as possible? They of course have to hit the key points of, one, It is the first Avatar animated content in 12 years, referencing the end of Korra. It's the first ATLA animated content in 18 years, referencing the end of ATLA. It is the first ever Avatar animated movie, and so they're going to, especially I suppose, want to highlight that. It's movie quality, animation, budget, and after all of this time, play into the nostalgia of you always wanted to know what happened to Aang when he was older after the show. Well, you're finally going to get to see that after all of this time, and it's in a big budget movie. That will sell a lot of people just by itself, because Avatar is one of those franchises that, like, a lot of people have seen. Maybe they've not kept up with it as much as the hardcore fan base have, but most people remember it, and it will be fascinating to see how much they can get people back just with hitting a few key nostalgic beats, of course. Now, on the technical side of things, I think somewhere, maybe not in the main marketing, but like more to people more in the know, they're probably going to want to highlight that this is super cutting edge animation. This is going to be at the absolute kind of like apex of kind of what we're trying to do. They're really teasing the idea that the animation quality here is something special. This will be a treat for fans of animation, let alone Avatar fans. And that's an exciting kind of prospect. So just the nostalgia of the first ATLA stuff in a really, really long time in animation, and it's kind of next level. So the action that you like from Avatar, you're going to get to see it in crazy, crazy style. And then the other part of it is just the basics of like, hey, this is a movie. It will have its own plot. The characters will have their own character arcs within this movie. What's the movie actually about? To appeal just to everyone. Why should Avatar fans want to see this? What is it doing for the Aang era, for Aang, for Katara, everyone? You know, in a way, what's the villain? Why is the villain interesting? Does this in any way stack up against other plot points we have seen in Avatar before? If they can hit those beats, especially with, say, like Dave Bautista in to voice the villain, you know, presenting the villain well will be a key part of the marketing as well, ultimately. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And then just like a quick point on just like, yeah, what do we want out of the movie? Because I think everyone deep down wants some level of nostalgia. We want to see the ATLA characters in their prime being amazing, but we do also want to just see a good plot, a good character arc, see a good movie that actually adds to the universe really well also. And it's really just all about, yeah, how do you make a kind of one-off story plot work really well and execute it all in 90 minutes? That's always been my slight hesitation with the movie as the first project, is just that it's a decent chunk of content, but it's also not that much compared to seasons of shows we've had before. What will come in like Seven Havens, it's 90 minutes. It'll be an amazing 90 minutes, hopefully, but you know, how do they get that across? And that's where some of the communication surrounding other stuff comes into play. Is the movie a one-off thing, one and done? Are we coming back to the adult Aang era with the second movie? Are they all sequels to each other? Those are the sort of questions they're going to eventually need to acknowledge, but we have to wait and see. So, moving on from the Aang movie, which is going to be the big thing in the year. The build up to it is going to be crazy when it finally happens. It's just that I think communication has been so bad across the years with Avatar Studios. It is so difficult to picture us suddenly having everything. We're excited as we could possibly be about all things Avatar Studios. It's hard to imagine that right now because of how rough the last few years have been just trying to keep up with this franchise. But we'll move on to Seven Havens, where they have actually opened up a little bit more about this, even though it's further off. So yeah, with Paramount, I suppose a little bit more hands-off on this series compared to the movie. They've already told us a bit about this. We know it's coming at some point in 2027, and especially if it is planned for, like, in any way early-ish 2027, like first half of 2027, we should get a decent amount of information on this show in 2026. Yes, it will be focused on the movie, but the whole point of Avatar Studios is that they want to have this kind of relatively continuous stream of content, that like it's not just one project, it's one project and then here's another one and then here's another one, and they want to get the cadence right for not overloading people all at once, but not having you wait an eternity between projects. So let's get into this. So with SDCC, yes, it's going to be more Aang movie focused than anything, but I still think when you do your Avatar Studios panel, you're going to want to mention something about the upcoming series. That, sure, promote the movie, but also highlight that it's not just this one movie that we're doing. We're back to do a lot. If you like Avatar, we're doing another series, and there's another movie coming, and we've got other plans for series as well. And we're really fleshing out all parts of the timeline and all of this stuff. That is a key point to emphasize, the sort of slate of content if you can. If that's at all what they're trying to do, they should mention that here. It will be actually, I think, kind of weird if they do a big SDCC panel and actually don't really mention Seven Havens, but that will be something to look for going into San Diego Comic-Con. I think we'll have a much better sense for if they will or won't mention Seven Havens when we're closer, of course. New York Comic Con definitely feels like it will be much more open to go big on Seven Havens, because both cons for 2027, so looking ahead, as in, let's say they don't talk about Seven Havens much at either convention, then we're suddenly getting to a position where like the show could be out before San Diego Comic Con 2027. And especially New York Comic Con 2027 in like October, the show is probably likely to be out before then. So if they want to have Seven Havens' real chance to shine at one of these cons, they kind of have to, I think, go for New York Comic Con this year, like 2026, or really have SDCC for 2027 be the big place where it gets a chance to shine. So yeah, I can see us coming out of 2026 with a full release date for Seven Havens, a decent amount of concept art / early images for Seven Havens, and maybe even an early clip or trailer, depending on how far into 27 the planned release actually is. At a guess, I'm going to be somewhat cautious here and say that the planned release is probably for June to October 2027. I'm going to guess that they probably don't want it to be over a year after the movie when it hits, just to keep some sense of continuity. But it could end up being maybe a little bit longer than we think. Like, it's not just going to be 2-3 months and then Seven Havens hits. I'm thinking it's probably going to be more like, and 6 to 9 months later, that's when we'll get Seven Havens. That's my guess. As for other stuff, there are other animated projects. Are we going to learn much about them? I think the movies are very interesting, because obviously they very much hinge on the success, I guess, of the first movie. But it's also weird that we haven't really heard much about, say, movie 2. If they are planning to get that out in any sort of a reasonable time frame to follow up the first one, it feels like we almost should have heard something already. So that almost gives me the impression that like maybe it's not meant to be a direct sequel and it is more just, hey, it's another movie. But there are also other animated series planned, and you know, we had the Red Thunder series kind of rumored a little bit at the a few months ago. This is that rumored Water Avatar series. Again, it's still early stages on a lot of this stuff. We're not really sure what the overall plan is. With Avatar Studios, all we particularly know is just Aang movie, Seven Havens, and then they are planning to do more movies and series. The details of which we'll get more information on as we go forward. I can see them maybe lightly touching on the idea of, and here's a lot of this other stuff at some of the panels. As for if they'll detail it properly, give us a proper slate, I'm not really sure. I think they're kind of hesitant to do a lot of that stuff. I think we'll just be happy that they're talking about the two main projects, and maybe more into the year after, that's when we'll get into the deeper kind of situation with the other projects. There's also the situation where, like with Seven Havens, it's currently confirmed for 2 books, but there are rumors that it might have been also confirmed for 2 more books, so bringing it up to 4. And that's interesting because we don't know what the plan is for Avatar Studios when it comes to seasons of other shows and stuff like that. Are they planning to have overlap between these things? Because officially, like, they still haven't like really revealed what the situation is with regards to all the different animation studios, who's animating what, how exactly this is all working, that sort of situation. There's a lot of core Avatar Studios information that we still definitely need to get. But the main thing is that it does look like this just by default has to be the year we finally get going. And all they need to do is market the movie well, have it come out, have it be received reasonably well, and then set the stage for Seven Havens. And if they can do that, I think Avatar will make a pretty solid return overall, especially backed up by a lot of this other stuff like Netflix Avatar and publishing, as we'll get into. But yeah, it's exciting times. It's just, I think the main thing I want to emphasize here is just, I'm excited to be excited again as an Avatar fan. I felt that like since 2021 and the Avatar Studios original announcement, it's been very difficult to get truly excited for anything because there's never been any, I think, clear sense for when we're actually going to see any of this stuff, or when they're going to properly detail or talk about any of this stuff in such a degree where we can actually, as fans, talk about it and get excited. This will be the year we're actually able to get excited. We can have actual expectations for events like San Diego Comic-Con and not just kind of praying in hope that they deliver something to us. It has to happen. It's locked in at this point. If they don't deliver, people are going to be annoyed, and they just have to get it right. That's the situation they're in right now. So next we'll move on to video games, and yeah, we're going to get some video game stuff in 2026. Do I expect it to be a mega year for video games? I don't think so, but there'll be enough to make it at least exciting, given that this is the launch year for Avatar Studios. We're going to have some game stuff. So Avatar Legends Realms Collide, the ongoing mobile game, is going to continue into 2026. I know a lot of people have completely bounced off this game. It's just not for a lot of Avatar fans, but it is going to continue. It is going to have regular updates. The big thing is that it seems like they're finally getting around to putting novel characters in the game. Now, admittedly, it's only Rongi that has been confirmed, but that still will be a sort of notable addition to the game. I'm not the biggest fan of how they seem to go about choosing what characters do get added to the game. It seems exceptionally like random, and that there's no real kind of big deal made out of like the next character being added. But it will be interesting to see if this game has any like Avatar Aang movie collab content by the time we get to like October. Probably expect something just because of how regularly updated this game will be. We'll move on to the AAA RPG game, Ice Wars. Look, I don't think we're expecting anything of any real substance on this in 2026. Everything they said about this year, the once or twice that it got mentioned in interviews, it's still really, really early on. When it was announced at the end of last year, 2024, they already said that look, it's going to take a long time for this to really be anything. So look, I don't expect anything on this in 2026. 2027 might be the year we actually start to hear something for the first time properly about this. Ultimately, it's just nice that there is a big Avatar game in development, and we'll see what it is when we actually get there. Next, Avatar Legends, the fighting game. This is what looks to be the kind of big game for the year. We'll see just how big it is by the time we get to release, but the current release window is summer 2026. We expect more alpha tests and probably a bigger beta test as we go through the months at the start of next year. They've already done the like initial alpha test, and then they're going to do the one for kind of the rest of the world. And then yeah, there probably will be some sort of a bigger public kind of beta style thing as well. The early reception to the mechanics for this game seem pretty strong, so the pressure is mostly going to be on sort of like presentation, what the story mode is, and how much just content that they have. How big a budget game is this? Can they add enough characters to kind of keep it going and make it a kind of game that actually lasts? That's going to be the big thing. How many playable characters, how many stages are you going to have? And especially for, I think, people like myself who are not maybe super into fighting games, The single player content, the story mode, and any extra stuff that you have going on there is going to be a big thing in terms of having this game appeal to more than just the super kind of hardcore fighting game audience. So yeah, the timing of this game should be pretty good. Like, summer 2026 is ideal. We've talked about how probably in or around June, July is when a lot of stuff is probably going to super heavily kick off for Avatar Studios. So having a big game release in or around that time is pretty exciting, because it's going to be around SDCC and likely the Aang movie trailer. So that's a relatively big deal. The only other thing I'll say on this is just that I do hope when it comes to adding playable characters that, like the leaks maybe suggest, it is more than just the Aang era and the Korra era, and that it does feature stuff like Kyoshi and other stuff as well. But yeah, this game also, you kind of wonder, like, hey, it's releasing in and around the movie. Will they have any tie-in content? Could be a cool thing to do. In terms of other stuff, we know Avatar Studios is working on many other game projects. Some of them small, some of them slightly bigger, that sort of thing. So it won't be surprising if we do maybe get other stuff announced for 2026. Will it actually come out in 2026? I'm not entirely sure. But for instance, we have had basically a tease that there probably will be more Avatar Fortnite stuff coming in terms of new items for the shop. They might have a proper event kind of as part of that. I get the impression the general Fortnite community likes the kind of element items that they added, and I think it was a pretty successful collab. So adding more characters, and again, especially if they time it with maybe the Aang movie release in October, it could be really big. The only other collab I'll mention is Sonic Racing Crossworlds. Its final crossover DLC is Avatar Legends, and based on the leaks that we've seen, it does look like the movie Aang design is part of this collab. So one of the characters that will be added is older Aang. We don't really know a lot about the rest of what the DLC is going to be, other than I think we're expecting like a track, a vehicle, I think one other character, and Aang, and then bits and pieces of other stuff. But yeah, that should again be in or around the release of the movie, and that will be exciting to just, have a big game getting a big crossover with Avatar at the time. It's going to be pretty exciting. But I think that is going to mostly be it for video game stuff right now. So next, let's go on to publishing. 2025 was a pretty odd and unpredictable year for publishing. It just felt like everything happened really early in the year and then very little happened. Now, clearly, the Aang movie delay impacted a bit of everything, and you definitely saw that with publishing. Because you can tell that a lot of, especially like the extra publishers who don't usually release many books, didn't really want to release kind of in the middle of nowhere and would prefer to hold their books back until closer to the Aang movie. And so we end up in this weird situation where we're going to have, I think, a relatively sparse early 2026 lineup for publishing, but by the end of the year we should have a pretty big publishing lineup once we especially get to October and the Aang movie, because there is going to be a bunch of tie-in material, and then all the other publishers are kind of releasing their books in or around that time as well. So we'll get into Dark Horse. So they have 3 books with dates. They have some other books that are sort of confirmed for 2026 that don't have dates, and there's probably going to be other ones as well. So with confirmed dates, we have the Fire and Family Treasury Library Edition on the 9th of June. So this, of course, collects Azula in the Spirit Temple, Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, and Ashes of the Academy in a hardcover library edition book. This is the second collected edition release, but it's the first one that's like a proper collected edition and not just the box set. So that is a nice release. The middle book here, Avatar Legends, Masters of the Elements Volume 1, is out on the 14th of July. Now, what this is a new book that Dark Horse are doing, so you're immediately seeing that they are expanding their publishing offerings here. Different kind of formats and series. This is one of them. Now, we've seen this kind of style of book before. It's an anthology book, it's a short story collection, but specifically it's a volume 1. This is planned to be a ongoing series, so there'll be Masters of the Elements volume 2. But obviously, as you can see, it's the first time a Dark Horse comic is using Avatar Legends. On the cover, you can see that the idea here is to have stories about Yang Chen, Kyoshi, Roku, as well as the usual comic avatars Aang and Korra. So this book we know is half reprints. It is going to reprint a couple of the Free Comic Book Day books, but it still leaves room for what looks to be maybe about 4 new comics. One about Yang Chen, one about Kyoshi, one about Roku, and one other one probably that probably will be given to Korra because of the 3 reprints that are going to be in here. One of them's Korra, 2 of them are Aang era, so they'll probably even it out for Korra. So, should be a cool book. It all depends on how good the stories, especially for Yang Chen, Kyoshi, and Roku are, but cool that there is some expansion going on here. Then, Sokka's Boomerang class is Chibi Volume 2. Yes, they are coming back to the Chibi comics years after the first volume, with a different artist. But yeah, it looks like a pretty simple story. The first Chibi volume wasn't super great. This will probably be more of the same. But it is a nice book to have on the shelves at this time period for Avatar, just to have different age ratings of comics. So that should be pretty decent. As for the books that are sort of confirmed for 2026 but don't have dates yet, we have the Kyoshi Warrior miniseries and also the Kaya one-shot comic. They're basically confirmed for 2026, just because they have been partially detailed. The news has sort of started about them. But yeah, it's a weird situation where we got information about these books before Masters of the Elements or the Chibi comic was ever even announced, yet we still don't have proper details on these. With the Kaya comic, it is unfortunate that it really looks like this comic is likely going to release after July. So it's probably going to put it at basically like a year and a half after Mystery of Pension Island, the previous kind of Korra one-shot comic. So yeah, I think we just have to accept that with the creative team that they have on those Korra comics, that they are just taking a very, very long time. We just have to get into our heads that those books cannot really be regular for whatever reason, and that's just the way it looks right now. The miniseries is also weird, just with regards to the details about it. We've never had a miniseries before. It looks like this is going to be like single issue comics for basically the first time on Avatar. It's basically planned to be, I think, 3 issues, but we don't know so many details about this, like the exact nature of these issues. Is it just standard 20-22 page comics? Are they released monthly? Lots of stuff we don't know, but it is cool that, again, they're expanding out the publishing kind of offerings by having, okay, the one-shot comics, but then also these miniseries where maybe into the future that can be 4 or 5 issue miniseries, or like the format can change, because that's what we've been wanting, is that the one-shot format is so set in stone. It's a set page count, but the miniseries offers the opportunity to maybe do smaller stories or bigger stories depending on what they need to do, given that they might be using single issues for the first time in a while. It also allows for like the release cadence to be a little bit better, where it's not just the whole book comes out all at once, but instead it's like issue 1 here, next month the next issue comes out, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's interesting. I think both of these look like they could be very interesting. Getting to see Kaya's past in terms of what's going on, that's actually pretty nice. And then the Kyoshi Warrior miniseries is going to include Suki, but it looks like it's mostly going to solve the kind of issue in a way of characterizing the other Kyoshi warriors from the Aang era, which is interesting by itself. But yeah, so the Kaya comic, I'm guessing, will probably be a September, kind of October, November release. I just struggle to believe they're going to get it too close to anything else. The miniseries could be earlier. This could still be a relatively early in the year thing, because they're single issues. They can be solicited a little bit earlier, but we've yet to hear about them just yet. So I don't think it's going to be that early in the year, but we're waiting to see what the plan is here. There is a Free Comic Book Day book, but actually there's some weirdness with Free Comic Book Day this year, where it's actually two separate events that are different but exactly the same. It's Free Comic Book Day 2026, but it's also Comics Giveaway Day 2026, and Avatar is actually part of Comics Giveaway Day 2026. It's mostly down to different publishers having different relationships with different distributors, effectively, and so because Dark Horse is more tied into Penguin Random House, they're doing Comics Giveaway Day and not Free Comic Book Day. But it'll all be available in the same stores, basically. But yeah, we do have an Avatar comic. You'll note here it is Avatar Legends, like Masters of the Elements. And if you do look at the full creative team breakdown there, this creative team is listed basically on Masters of the Elements. So this looks very much like this is going to be a preview for Masters of the Elements, rather than a fully new, separate, original story. Likely, we will get one of the new stories from Masters of the Element here as a preview, and the book will probably also quite heavily highlight that Masters of the Elements is out 2 months later in July, like we talked about. So I think that's pretty reasonable and fine. The fact that we now have an ongoing kind of short story collection thing is nice. It gives them a place to put these kind of short stories quite regularly. This is, I think, the right way to do a lot of this stuff. There's still maybe a chance it is an original book, but like, I think a lot of it points to the fact it's probably more of a preview. As for which kind of story they'll do, my guess is that just for the sake of like hitting home the Avatar Legends thing, this probably works better if you show us the Yang Chen, Kyoshi, or Roku story. Whereas if you only showed us an Aang or a Korra story, it doesn't really show us what's different about Avatar Legends for like comics readers. So that'd be my take on this. So that's comics, and we'll move into Abrams' books. And this is the weird thing as well. Currently, Abrams don't actually have any book announced for 2026, but we basically know what to expect. We know that their marketing approach is that they will have 2 books each year, because they have 2 ongoing series now. They have Chronicles of the Avatar, about the Avatars, and then they have Avatar Legends, about unsung heroes. City of Echoes started that, and that is their plan going forward, is to continue these series, 1 book in each series a year. So we're going to get Avatar Legends Book 2 and Chronicles of the Avatar Book 7 in 2026. But what are they going to be about? With Avatar Legends Book 2, likely this will be the July release. Very difficult to predict the character because it's Avatar Legends, so it could be Aang era, it could be Korra era, or it could be one of the other eras. We know for sure Korra era is definitely on the table. It's in the description for City of Echoes when it describes what the series actually is. All we know is that the series is about unsung heroes, basically a minor character becoming the main character in their own book. So many characters fit that bill, but who are they specifically going to choose? Jin really worked, very nice choice, but what character kind of matches that? And then we might get to see that, hey, maybe it's a more notable minor character. Like, it doesn't have to be really, really unsung hero, but it can just be about a noted minor character. We have to wait and see. Chronicles of the Avatar is maybe a little bit clear as to what we're going to be doing. Likely this, I guess, will be the December release, following the same pattern as this year. Hopefully not as late in December as Awakening of Roku. I think they need to get it earlier in December, just because people get distracted by the holidays and stuff like that. It's not a great time to release it like 2 days before the end of the year. But anyway, the new Avatar, because we're going on to book 7, Roku will have finished his duology at this point. Likely it's going to be Kuruk. Just because, 1, we've not done a water avatar before, 2, he would be the last of the group of 4 avatars before Aang to do, and that seems to be the very premise for why they started Chronicles of the Avatar, was to kind of go through those avatars that we kind of knew bits and pieces about, flesh them out a bit more. And then after Kuruk, we can go into the other avatars where we don't know as much about. Now, Zito is sort of set up in a sort of similar way where he could also, I guess, be done, but I don't think they're going to do 2 fire avatars in a row. Zito feels like maybe a nice way to comfortably go into book like 9 and 10, and then you go into the really unknown avatars after that, but we will have to wait and see when they do the announcements. My guess is we'll probably find out about Avatar Legends Book 2 probably in January, February, probably March at the very latest. Chronicles of the Avatar Book 7, I'm guessing we'll maybe learn about this either just before or during San Diego Comic-Con, depending on how much of a publishing panel presence there is. I'm assuming they'll still continue to do other panels in addition to the big stuff at the conventions. But moving on to Magpie Games, they did not have a very active year. Voyage of the Unity is the only like RPG thing we've heard about for a very, very long time, and it's not out until like September, October next year. It's a really long time away. And sure, we might get the digital copy of this a bit earlier, but the physical stuff is not out until September, October, and that's assuming no delays. They've been, I guess, relatively reasonable in that, like, it's a far enough into the future where, like, they kind of have to hit this because it's so far off. But yeah, any delays, and this is suddenly very frustrating, and it's a giant gap between RPG releases. Otherwise, yeah, Magpie themselves have been super radio silent recently, because Voyage of the Unity is mostly a Beadle and Grimm-led project. Now, Magpie are involved, it's just, like, it's not in the same degree, I think, as other things. We were still waiting for stuff like, say, the Spirit World book, and in general, what the plan for the RPG is going forward. Are we going to do anything new, like, introduce new eras, or is it all going to be Voyage of the Unity type stuff going forward? We just don't know, but we need information on it, certainly. Going into other books, we have I Am Sokka, which is coming out on the 6th of January. This is the 5th I Am book. They're nice, the art is nice, cool to have an actual proper early release in the year. Also out relatively early in the year on the 10th of March is Relics of the Four Nations from Insight Editions. Remember, with this book, it is less a book and more a group of kind of merchandise, almost like items, with the book acting as a sort of description for effectively what they are. It could be a fun little thing. I'm not expecting this book to be kind of blow away amazing, but I think it will be fun as just like a unique thing. It's taking basically sort of what like the Avatar like legacy books did, where like they're this kind of scrapbook style things, but leaning more into the inserts than the book. That's what this is kind of trying to do. We also have the Amigurumi book, which is basically Avatar Crochet, but you're more making the characters here. That's out on the 19th of May, which is something a little bit different for Avatar. Also, we have two books coming out on the 11th of August, Avatar Color by Number and Avatar Paint with Water from the same publisher. And these books especially, you can see the strategy from a lot of the extra publishers. These were originally planned for by basically much earlier in the year, and I think Paint with Water actually was planned for late 2025, but they pushed it way off into next year, clearly to get some of the benefit in terms of sales for being released close-ish to the Aang movie, or at least within the marketing cycle of the Aang movie, in that by August, yeah, we'll definitely have a trailer at least for the Aang movie. Speaking of the Aang movie, it's going to have publishing stuff. We already know that to be the case. We got kind of marketing listings. This actually comes from the I Am Sokka marketing materials from Penguin Random House, of course. So you'll note there it says, the Spring 2026 Avatar movie program includes a junior novel, an 8x8, an SI or a Little Golden Book, and a full-color sticker book. Now, because of the delay, the spring movie program now, I guess, becomes the fall 2026 movie program. And instead of being planned for early 2026, will be more of the late 2026 release window. Realistically, we would expect probably all 5 of these books to release the week the movie comes out. It might be like before or after, depending on the exact kind of timing of things, but these books should all be out to coincide with the movie. So yeah, we have Penguin information. We know they're at least doing some of the basic books. And to go over what they are again, so junior novelization of the movie, that's actually going to be relatively nice because it'll help us maybe get some of the details that maybe the very visual focused movie might not kind of go into. I'm not expecting it to be blow away amazing, but we could get some nice details from that. The 8x8 is referring to the size of the book. It's an 8-inch by 8-inch kind of picture book, ultimately. Not that many words in this one, but very much more focused on big pieces of art. A Step into Reading book is more of a basic book that is meant to be helping people to read, and it's a mix of course, basic text, but also a lot of visuals, of course. Little Golden Book, the I Am Sokka book, is a Little Golden Book, but we're going to get one very specifically about the movie, which is interesting, and then of course a sticker book. Now, based on the way they've done these in the past, it looks like this is probably going to be more of like, it's an activity book that comes with a bunch of sticker kind of sheets. So think of it that way. So that's just one publisher as well. Like, we don't really know, of course, what like Dark Horse's plans are going to be for in or around October. Sure, they'll have the Kaya comic that might be out in or around then, but what about other stuff? You know, there might be other publishers that come in to do other different types of books as well, stuff that hasn't been announced yet. But it looks like there's going to be an attempt to really push things in a big way as we kind of go forward. Let's get into comic speculation now. Books that we just don't know about yet that would be more speculation. So comics are the main place we need to speculate on because, one, it is very clear at this point that the Korra one-shots are just taking a very long time. So with the Kaya comic still without a date, I don't think there is any way we can reasonably expect the Korra one-shot comic number 3 to be in 2026. The creative team should be doing this book as well, but it doesn't look like the timing is going to work out that way at all. Interestingly, we are left without any real information on an Aang era book, an ATLA comic. Where's the next ATLA one-shot comic? We basically know Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Wortman are working on a book somewhere in the background, but they've not even teased it like at all. So where we left off, of course, we've just finished off a trilogy. That's where we're getting the Fire and Family Library Edition. So are we just starting a new one-shot trilogy? Are they doing something different? This could be a nice way to introduce like comics set in the adult Aang era, where you're keeping that creative team on Aang comics. It's just they now have this new era to explore. That would be a really, really cool way to do it. That would certainly drive a lot of attention back towards the comics of like, if you want more of the team when they're older, well, the comics are now open to doing some of that stuff. That could be very, very cool. It's either that or just in the gap between one-shot comic trilogies, it's just taking a little bit longer to do the kind of production kind of work, setting up the next trilogy. And maybe that's why we don't know about this one yet. But I do expect there to be a kind of Aang comic at some point. The comic miniseries also opens the door for even more stories. But given that we still don't have a date for the Kyoshi Warrior series, I don't think we're going to get another miniseries in 2026. But I'd like to know, like, is this going to be a regular thing? Like, are we going to get a miniseries every year? That sort of stuff. Otherwise, with Dark Horse, for instance, we would definitely look towards stuff like, hey, there's a movie coming out this year. Dark Horse have done art books for all the previous shows. So we have to assume there's going to be a Dark Horse art book for the Aang movie. But is that going to be this year? It seems a little bit late to do that. So unless they're really on top of things, that's probably more of a 2027 release, getting it out within the year following the release of the movie rather than immediately upon release. But who knows? There might be other publishers putting out books that are kind of like pseudo art books, and then we'll get the proper art book kind of later on. We're just kind of waiting to see kind of what happens there. There's also Bending Academy Book 2, which, again, from marketing material, we know is basically planned for 2026. Well, we don't have any real details on it overall. This should be Bending Academy Fire number 2. But we also don't know the situation for, like, is it reasonable to expect multiple of these in a year or not? That's an interesting point, but that's where we are at. So, assuming the schedule goes the way we maybe expect it to go, we pretty reasonably could get this lineup of books here. It's a large amount of books. I think it's the most we've ever covered here, but it makes sense in the year that we are going to have. A lot depends on Dark Horse and what they announce maybe for later in the year, and if some of the books that are currently undated but like are happening make it on time. But, you know, in here's like 5 completely new comics. There's relatively few reprint books in here, ultimately, when you break it down. 2 YA novels, 3 kids novels, so that would be the junior novel for Aang, and maybe 2 volumes of Bending Academy. And then, look, the Spirit World RPG book is probably the most speculative thing on the list, but at the very least, 1 RPG release, maybe another. We just don't know what the full situation is. And so the idea is that, yeah, we've got a pretty nice lineup of content ultimately when you do break it down. Now, Free Comic Book Day or Comics Giveaway Day might not be as interesting if it is just a preview for Masters of the Elements, but if you're following the franchise on a day-to-day basis, that will be a new comic at the time, even if it later gets kind of done in Masters of the Elements. The only other thing I'll note is towards the bottom there, the Little Golden Book boxed set. This was something listed in marketing material as well, just that I guess they plan to release I Am Sokka, Katara, Zuko, Toph, and those 5 books all together in a box set at some point, probably much closer to the movie. Not sure if that's going to be still in the plans, but it's something that we do kind of half know about. So nice lineup of books, certainly, based on what we seem to know right now. We'll see how the year actually goes in comparison to what we maybe expect. Okay, so next we'll go into merchandise. Now, straight away, I will say, there's not really that much to talk about with merchandise. I think we're going to have a good year for merchandise, but like because of the way communication from Jazzwares has been, we don't really have much to directly kind of preview going into 2026. Like, sure, the Jazzwares toy line is big. That's the big merchandise thing that we now have. In addition to Jazzwares, we have U2's First Four Figures, Iron Studios, continue to make stuff, but they're either somewhat inaccessible in certain regions, or they're just like more high-end to where it's merch that like not everyone is going to be into. I assume we will see these and more companies revealed to be making Aang movie merch by the time we get to a point where merchandise is able to be revealed for the very secretive Aang movie. We also have the Journey of Aang board game, which of course had the Game Found crowdfunding campaign. It is going to be releasing within the first half of 2026 for backers, and it is also going to have a more general release. Now, it's still going to be somewhat specific, probably to mostly comic book stores, game stores type thing, but still it will be available in places to get, even if you missed out on the crowdfunding. And it's a pretty cool board game. I'm really excited to get my kind of finalized copy, but that's where we're at there. One company that is in a weird spot is going to be Funko, where we would absolutely expect there to be Funko Pops for all things Avatar, especially with new stuff coming up. But there have, of course, been rumors recently that Funko is in trouble and might not last that much longer. So I don't know, we might get some Aang movie Funko Pops before Funko goes pop, I guess. But you know, we have to wait and see on that sort of stuff. Speaking about Jazzwares a little bit more specifically, it is really exciting on the merchandise side of things to be going into a year just aware that like we've got a big company doing a big toy line for our franchise. So I expect at least 2 to 3 waves of Jazzwares Avatar in 2026. They've more or less confirmed that they are doing movie merch within their line. Remember, the way it's all set up with the packaging is that they've got Avatar Legends stuff all over their packaging. It looks like they can easily adjust their packaging to, if they wanted to, put Korra stuff in there, switch it up for the movie. It seems pretty clear how they can do this in terms of just highlighting that it's this character from the movie, it's this character from book 2, from book 3. They're in a nice position with just how much stuff they're able to do. So they can very easily, it seems like, transition their from like, oh, here's Aang Wave 1, ATLA Wave 2, here is now the Aang movie. The Aang movie is just the next wave of the toy line. The packaging looks a little bit different, but it's just that. I'm fascinated to see what they do, how they do it, because for like the first time ever, we are actually going to have a correctly timed toy line with the release of an Avatar project. We had an original ATLA toy line back in like 2005, 2006, but I would say what happened with that one was that they went too big too early, and then they stopped the toy line right as Avatar gained its really strong popularity right at the end of like middle end of book 2, especially going into book 3. They didn't have the merch out there by the time the show was at its peak. Korra, of course, never got a toy line. It basically had very little merch during its entire run. And I say even me saying very little merch is almost over-exaggerating how much merch there was. There was nothing, basically, apart from very kind of weird releases like Korra shot glasses. Anyone remember the Korra shot glasses as some of the like only original merch that there was in like that first year? Crazy stuff. But now we're actually going to be in a situation where There's an established toy line that will probably have at least Wave 2 come out in the start of the year before the movie stuff properly gets going. And then, yeah, it is going to be so exciting to see Avatar on the shelves, new Avatar stuff, and to see them just kind of delivering on that. We'll have to wait and see what the full strategy is. Is it just like all this typical lines we have for Jazzwares will just now be for the Aang movie? We don't really know. But the assumption is just that, like, hey, they have the master license kind of for Avatar, so I guess they get to do everything, including Seven Havens. So we'll see what happens there. Do we know anything specifically about future Jazzwares stuff? The only figure that we actually know for sure is going to be a thing is there will be a Katara, Book 3 Katara, in the 6.5-inch collector's line. That's the only figure that was shown at any of the toy fairs that we don't basically have already released. So there's that. And we don't know anything else. So we're waiting for better communication about what's next. I assume Jazzwares probably was somewhat hit hard by the delay, because I guess they basically have movie toys ready to go for January that they now have to hold back and keep secret until October, basically. So they're in a bit of a weird situation, but it is going to be really nice to have a full-on toy line for a new project. Next, we'll talk about soundtracks, also a kind of merch type thing. So a recent Jeremy Zuckerman interview seems to suggest that the Book 3 Fire soundtrack for Avatar is nearly done. So it should actually have its release in 2026. I think a lot of us were quite surprised that it took like basically an extra year longer than we thought it would for the Book 2 soundtrack to come out. But it does look like they're going to follow the Book 2 one up relatively quickly with Book 3. I will also mention that early on in the soundtrack releases being kind of confirmed to be a thing a few years back, Jeremy Zuckerman did mention that Korra was in the plans. At least he very much wants to get those Korra soundtracks out there. So hopefully sometime next year we maybe hear about what the plans are for the Korra releases, and we see, like, you know, is he going to want to re-record some of that, all of that, or can that just get kind of pushed out as something that just didn't happen while Korra was on the air? Remember, we got the Korra Book 1 soundtrack, but then they stopped after a certain point. But anyway, the other thing is Aang movie soundtrack. We have to assume, with their immense focus on the music, Avatar in concert, releasing the soundtracks, that of course they will intend to release the Aang movie soundtrack on release, ready to go for October. It would be weird at this point if they didn't. And that is a very interesting statement that I think we're now able to say about Avatar Studios, is that confidently you can say that, like, well, there's no way they're not going to do this, whereas during Korra's run, you had to assume they would always make the idiotic move when it came to this sort of thing. This time out, it's like, no, I think we're getting the Aang movie soundtrack on time, so people can actually, like, experience it properly. And that's going to be interesting just by itself. One of the last things I really want to mention here is just Braving the Elements. So Season 4 is done. We expect Season 5 to probably come back relatively quickly. They will cover Korra Book 3 and 4, so we'll get through Korra relatively quickly. But also, this should be the season of the podcast where things kick off for Avatar Studios. So what will we see the podcast sort of turn into, evolve into, when the big news is actually coming out? There's no need for the secrecy anymore, and it can just be open communication about some of this stuff. That's going to be an exciting kind of time, because you can tell they seem to like the podcast as a way to have a lot of the cast and crew have relatively, like, comfortable interviews. So if they can give those type of big interviews with the cast and crew of the new projects to the Braving the Elements podcast, we could get a pretty nice kind of conveyor belt of just, this is the really clear place to get those obvious first couple of interviews and so on. I do think they need to slightly evolve the way they approach podcasts where there is more news topics on them. I think they make it needlessly complicated, especially when they have a visual reveal on the podcast, that the audio podcast comes out like nearly a full day before the video podcast, and then the video podcast has weird licensing stuff on like YouTube in certain regions, and so there's weirdness surrounding that. They need to sort that out and just kind of push the news out there. I do appreciate Janet and Dante as kind of like the hosts of Avatar at this point. And I think the podcast will come across a little bit better when they're actually able to talk about newer stuff. I assume they'll continue the podcast to discuss like the Aang movie as it releases, and of course do episodes covering the episodes of Seven Havens when it drops. I think this could be the year where maybe there's a requirement to maybe, especially later on in the year, focus a bit more on Braving the Elements. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly note this. And then just a quick note on Chibi Minis. These started this year, releasing 3 of the planned 10 episodes on the official YouTube channel. Very poor communication surrounding these. We assume the rest will come in 2026. Yeah, weird situation here. Like I said, there's 10 planned episodes, but the only reason we know that is because of a press release from like February. They didn't talk about these since February until they like announced it at New York Comic Con that, hey, the first episode's out. And then we've got 3 of them. We haven't had one in a couple of weeks now, and they've not said what the release sort of schedule is for these. So they've not treated like new animation on YouTube particularly well here. Very weird situation. They're fun. There's not too much to them, but I would like to see the rest. So, you know, it'd be cool if they could communicate a bit better about what's happening here. Which leads us into the end of the video. So, 2026. The year Avatar Studios truly begins. A new era for the franchise. That is certainly the big hope and the real expectation for 2026. Netflix Season 2 and the Aang movie as the big releases, supported by hopefully notable Seven Havens news, a growing publishing output, and other stuff like merch through the Jazzwares toy line, video games like the fighting game, of course, should make for actually a pretty massive year for Avatar. The question remains about how big will they go with the marketing campaign? Will they actually, you know, turn our opinions around completely on their information strategy and actually be like, hey, they actually delivered here? Will it actually be a good way to reveal news to fans? We'll have to wait and see. The year needs to be successful to assure the future of the franchise. Just because, you know, that's clearly what Paramount are thinking about with this movie is box office. Can they get a good box office for the Aang movie and sort of confirm their confidence in Avatar when it comes to doing so many projects, doing more movies, that sort of thing. A lot will depend on how this year goes, but a lot of it is also on Paramount themselves. There's only so much we can do as fans, so we hope they actually deliver here. But yes, this looks like the year it's actually going to happen. And not just super speculative, but just they kind of have to do it this year, because if they don't, I don't really want to picture what that really looks like. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of having years kind of like 2025 was, where it's difficult to get excited for things because we just have no clue if they're going to deliver. Yes, I do think the first couple of months of 2026 might be a bit light on content if Netflix Avatar, you know, isn't going super early in the year. But they need to get that stuff started. Publishing needs to get rolling. And I think the second half of the year is going to be packed in a way that we haven't really had in a very long time for Avatar. And I think it's been so long that a lot of us, it's hard to picture what the fandom is actually like when we have a big active project ongoing that like there's news coming out for, because we just haven't been able to kind of get going and keep going over the last bunch of years since Avatar Studios has been announced. But it does look like this is the year things will finally happen. So that has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on 2026 for Avatar. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.